Hi, and welcome to Quarantine Cocktails with Chad, Nicole, and Miko, our special guest star.
Today we're talking about the Hanky Panky, which is a drink dating back to the early 1900s. It combines gin, sweet vermouth, and a small amount of Fernet. So the classic recipe
Yes.
is here.
1.5 ounces of London dry gin, an equal amount of sweet vermouth, and then a 1/2 tablespoon of Fernet.
So the exact date of the invention of this cocktail is unknown, like many that we talk about. But we do know that the drink was invented by Ada Coleman at the Savoy Hotel in London. So we haven't talked about a lot of women in cocktails, so this is one of the first, I think.
Yep.
She was the head bartender at the Savoy Hotel from 1903 to 1925, preceding Harry Craddock in the role. We've talked about him before. She was beloved by customers who dubbed her Coley. It was Coleman who really put the American bar at the Savoy on the map, and she was known as a very talented mixologist and also an energetic and welcoming hostess, serving famous customers like Mark Twain, Charlie Chaplin, and Marlene Dietrich.
Yes. Now, wasn't Coley also your nickname?
It was when I was little.
Nicole? Yeah.
Self-professed. I gave myself that nickname.
Not named after the famous bartender?
Yeah, maybe.
So according to Coleman herself, she invented the Hanky Panky at the behest of Charles Hawtrey, who was a well-known figure in the London stage acting world at the time. He was an actor and a manager, producer, and he was a frequent customer of the Savoy Hotel, American bar. And according to Coley, he was one of the best judges of cocktails around.
So one evening he was worn out from a rough week and he said, "Coley, I'm tired. Give me something with a bit of a punch to it." So she experimented for hours over the coming days and came up with something worthy for the next time Hawtrey came into the bar. So she presented him with the result. Upon tasting it, he immediately drained the glass and declared, "By Jove, this is the real Hanky Panky," therefore naming the drink and affirming its status as a staple.
That's right. So Coleman ran the bar until it shut down for renovations at the end of 1925, at which point her retirement was announced, and Craddock took over the running of the bar. Now, her retirement was big news. It was covered in at least 5 London newspapers, and the London Daily Express declared her the queen of cocktail mixers, and included her estimate of having poured over 1 million drinks to 100,000 customers. So she was pretty prolific.
So Craddock, who overlapped with Coleman for about 5 years in the role before succeeding her, may have been mentored by her, and he included the original Hanky Panky recipe in his masterpiece, the Savoy Cocktail Book, published in 1930.
Yes, and that was an extremely popular book, probably the best-selling cocktail book of all times. And that also cemented a bit of her legacy. So today she is considered one of the most influential female mixologists of all time, and arguably one of the top 10 overall. And the Hanky Panky is one of the 50 best-selling cocktails in the world.
Wow. And I had never heard of it until we started researching it. So now we can turn our attention to Fernet.
Yes.
It's one of the key ingredients in the Hanky Panky.
That's right. That's really what gives it its extra special character.
So Fernet is a class of digestif that is a subset of an Italian Amaros, which, as you recall, means bitter in Italian. Fernets are generally more bitter, more herbaceous, lighter in alcohol content.
Higher.
Yeah. Higher in alcohol content than other Amaris. Usually has a base of a grape distilled spirit. Usually contains a variety of herbs, spices, including bitter aloe, myrrh, angelica, and saffron.
Yes.
Interestingly enough.
Yeah. And it is said that Fernet was originally formulated as a medicine by one Dr. Fernet with over 50 herbs and botanicals in it. Now, this doctor may be a complete invention of marketing. He may have been a real person, possibly Italian or possibly Swedish, or the recipe may tie back to an earlier longevity elixir of possible Swedish origin dating back to the 15th century.
So what we do know is the first commercial Fernet was released by Felice Vitone of Milan in 1842, who is said to have reformulated the possible mythical doctor's recipe to make it more palatable.
Yes, and in 1845, 3 years later, the herbalist Bernardino Branca released his version as a cure for all things: cholera, stomach ache, nervous disorder, erectile dysfunction potentially. And its popularity, which was driven perhaps by a widespread cholera pandemic outbreak that year, led to the founding of the Fratelli Branca distillery in 1845 as well. And today, Fernet Branca by the Branca Fratelli is the most famous and largest of all Fernet brands. And one additional interesting side note is that the Fratelli Branca company is the consumer of about 75% of the world's entire supply of saffron.
That's very interesting.
Yes.
So Fernet then spread to the United States via Italian immigrants in the late 1800s, where its popularity was concentrated, interestingly enough, in San Francisco's North Beach neighborhood. Very strong Italian population there. It maintained a strong following in San Francisco through Prohibition. It was also still sold as a medicine, and over time it spread from there as a kind of bartender's handshake, if you will, and hangover remedy. Today, the city of San Francisco still accounts for about 35% of Fernet's U.S. consumption, which is quite a lot.
Yep, for one city. But San Francisco's consumption is dwarfed in the worldwide market by the country of Argentina, which consumes 75% of global Fernet production.
Super interesting.
Fueled by an influx of Italian immigrants in the late 1800s and early 1900s, its popularity in the country exploded over the first quarter of the 1900s. So much so that in 1925, Fernet Branca established its only distillery outside of Italy in Argentina to continue and capitalize on its popularity there. And it's only gone on to grow further and further in popularity. It's now essentially the national spirit of Argentina, and it's often served as Fernet con Coca, which of course means with Coca-Cola. So if you're wondering what to do with your leftover Fernet, you could try it with a Coke and see how you enjoy that. So today we're going to make the Hanky Panky, and we're going to make a version that slightly honors its popularity in Argentina. And so we'll be adding in a secret additional ingredient, which is some delicious Latin-inspired bitters called Moondog from Bittered Sling. That's a Canadian bitters company. But Moondog has some chili and lime and mint notes to it. And so it gives it some herbaceousness and some additional some spice to go along with the bitterness of the Fernet. Cool. And so we're going to incorporate this into the drink. We are, given that the name Hanky Panky has a beautiful rhyming sound to it, we gave our drink a rhyming sound as well. We call it Bello Telo. Now, Tello, I don't know if you know what a Tello is.
No. What is a Tello, Chad?
Well, a Tello is a no-tell motel in Argentina. Apparently, these became popular when the brothels were closed in Argentina in the late 1930s, and the tellos became very popular and continue to be popular to today. So, given that this is the Hanky Panky and with an Argentinian flair, I thought Bello Telo would be a fun name for it. All right, I'm going to start mixing while my assistants go elsewhere. So we'll start with our gin. I recommend a London Dry Gin. I'm using Tanqueray today. Otherwise, it's got some similarity to the Martinez, which we covered, which was also gin and sweet vermouth. But there we go more into the sweet side of it by using an Old Tom gin to evoke the original Martinez from Jerry Thomas back in the 1860s. This time we'll go with a London Dry Gin, which by the early 1900s had become much more the mode for gin, especially in London at the Savoy Hotel. Now we'll use an Italian vermouth, Carpano, wonderful sweet vermouth, the original of sweet vermouths, and this is my go-to. So we'll go ahead and throw that in there. Carpano has this lovely, rich vanilla flavor to it, and is on the sweeter side, and will complement the bitterness of the Fernet. So there is the Fernet. We'll use Fernet Branca, the standard bearer of all Fernet, and we're going to use half a teaspoon per drink. So today, that means 1 teaspoon. You could get the glasses out, my dear. And the ice. We're almost ready to stir. Now this is going to, and then finally, we will put in our couple dashes each of the Bittered Sling Moondog Latin inspired bitters. And that will keep this pretty squarely in the bitter side of things. Definitely going to come out quite a bit more bitter than most of the drinks. I tend to have a little bit of a sweet tooth, but this one will be more bitter. It's going to be stirred because we're using basically only spirits in this drink. There's no citrus being incorporated, no reason to shake and aerate and texturize. So we're just gonna get our shaker nice and reasonably full with ice. And we're going to stir. As usual, we stir a bit longer than a pro might stir because we're using ice out of our freezer, which doesn't, usually the pros are keeping their ice at a much higher temperature than you are in your freezer. So you should learn your own ice behavior to get the right level of dilution. You generally want to get some dilution up to about, the final drink should be, almost a third water, honestly. So you want to get some dilution. If you're working with a drink that's coming in at about 3 ounces or just over 3 ounces like this one, you want to expect it to come out to about 4.5 ounces. All right. So we're stirring. We'll go a little bit longer. Stirring.
I had to take a break and kill a spider in your daughter's room.
Oh, fabulous. Now, have you ever been to Argentina?
No, never been to South America.
Oh, me neither. I think we need to get a trip in. Get up to some Hanky Panky down there. All right, so we've stirred our drink. We're now going to strain it and pour it into our Nick and Nora glasses.
And these are how many ounces?
These ones are a little larger than the ones that I've been using in past ones.
6.
These are some new ones. So these will come in at about 6. So I think I got pretty close to the right level of dilution here.
Do you garnish it with anything?
Yes. And then we will garnish this with a little bit of orange, which will just brighten it just a little bit to ease back on a little bit of the bitterness. So I'm just going to take my Y peeler. I'm going to do, I don't want to get too deep. I don't really want to get into the pith because then you will get some bitterness, but just a nice little piece of lemon peel. I like to squeeze that skin side. If you want to hold, if you could, hold it. I don't know if you can. Hold that and Miko, the other glass. And Miko, hold that up. We'll express over that and really try to get those orange essences out of it and there. And I think I'm just going to discard those to the side. We don't necessarily need to keep it on the glass. But that is our finished product of the Bello Telo, our version of the Hanky Panky. So we'll give a cheers to Coley, Ada Coley Coleman, the most influential female bartender of all time.
Absolutely.
And we'll knock this back also for our Argentinian friends as well, hoping they're having a good time tonight like we are.